What is up, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the 3&D here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Make sure you hit subscribe below and follow our socials at the 3&D ETB and at ETB Network. On tonight's episode, we'll be taking a look at a lot of different stuff that's been going on throughout the past week. Bunch of college basketball news with Cooper Flagg beginning his visits. Dior Johnson now decommitting from Pittsburgh and his wild journey through the basketball scene. Some more of the remaining Pac-12 teams and what they're looking at. Some more James Harden, Damian Lillard stuff. Some Giannis news and another big signing for the Charlotte Hornets. So I hope everybody's doing well. We'll lead things off tonight with news on Bronny James. So Bronny James has a heart defect. The news just came out a few days ago that his collapse and heart issues are due to a congenital heart defect. Now, as bad as that sounds, I'm no doctor, but as bad as that sounds, they say that his basketball career should resume pretty solidly. He can probably take medication. He's going to need to have doctors check on him, all that kind of stuff. But it is a little bit alarming anytime that it's not caused by a certain specific issue. It's more of a birth defect, which a lot of people have, and a lot of times people don't realize it until it's too late. I mean, how many times have we seen that happen throughout sports, where perfectly healthy guy collapses and then you find out that they had underlying heart issues that you wouldn't know that they had unless an occurrence like this kind of happened. So it's good news on Bronny James' part, though, that there's nothing extremely wrong. But as for his basketball career, it's going to definitely make things a little bit more interesting and, a little bit more scary, too, as he enters his freshman year at USC. He's going to definitely be getting a lot of playing time. He's one of the top incoming freshmen, and his hopes will be to enter the NBA draft in 2024 and begin his NBA career as well. And a lot of people think that he could be a lottery pick. I don't necessarily think he's right there yet. A lot of people think that he's more of like a late first, early second round pick, but his freshman year is going to tell a lot. It's definitely going to tell a lot. A bad one is not going to help him in any case, and it might even make him have to stay in college longer. I mean, we'll see if he actually ends up doing that. A lot of guys, regardless, decide to come out during their freshman year, even if they have a bad one, and take a second round selection. But we got a little bit more news on that, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes about that this college basketball season. And praying to God, hopefully it does not affect him nearly as much as the issue that happened a couple weeks ago. So Bronny James got that information. Some more information, too, on some of the bigger named incoming freshmen in the country. Cooper Flagg, who is the number one recruit in all of high school basketball for the class of 2024. He's beginning his visits with 3 different teams, and you can probably guess at least 2 of those teams who they're going to be: Duke, Kansas, and then the reigning champs UConn are the other ones. So he's beginning his visits to see who he's going to play for next season. He's an incoming senior in high school. He's the number one recruit in the nation for this upcoming year. He reclassified. He was supposed to be a junior in high school this year, but he actually just reclassified a few weeks back. And now he'll be a senior this year, and he'll be able to graduate in 2024 and be eligible for the draft in 2025. So he's not going to be this upcoming draft, but he's going to be next year. And he's a great talent. He's getting more hype than Chet Holmgren got, but he's a little bit of a better player than Chet Holmgren in that kind of sense. But I bring up Chet Holmgren because he's similar to him. He's an athletic big who does a lot. He can shoot, he can handle the ball, he's great in the post, all that kind of stuff. But he's also built a lot bigger than Chet Holmgren is. He has more muscle, he has more skin, he has more tone to his muscles and everything. And people think that he could be the next star in the NBA too. So he's just beginning, and he's from Maine too. You don't see too many NBA players coming out of the state of Maine, which is very interesting. So He's beginning his visits. Duke, Kansas, and UConn are the first visits. The first one he's going to look at is Duke. Right as of right now, the crystal ball, if you check on verbal commits and if you're on any of the sites that give you the information about recruitments and all the commitments and stuff that happen in college basketball, the crystal ball right now has a high chance that he goes to Duke. A lot of people are anticipating that he probably is going to go to Duke. He seems like a Duke guy. I mean, maybe it's the Christian Laettner comparison. Maybe it's not, but he does kind of come across as a Duke guy. You know, he's one of those guys that could be that you could see being a one and done first overall pick from Duke. So I could definitely see why people think that they're the heavy favorite to begin with. But Kansas and UConn are also going to look at him, and that would be absolutely incredible if UConn was able to land him, especially with Donovan Clingan, who is going to probably be a lottery pick in this upcoming draft. He's going to be a sophomore big man and is going to get a lot more minutes this year with Adama Sanogo now heading to the NBA. He was one of the better players off their bench. He's a 7'2", very athletic kid. And a lot of people anticipate him being a first-round pick, so that makes things pretty interesting. So Cooper Flagg now going to be taking a look at 3 different schools. Not too much more information behind that. He's entering his senior year, so he could very well. A lot of guys you'll see make a verbal commitment at the beginning of their senior year. You know, sometimes guys make a commitment in their sophomore or junior year. But a lot of time, the guys who are undecided will make a commitment like either early in the college basketball season or before the college basketball season starts. Some of them take their time, like Bronny James did last year. Bronny James took all the way until the end, as he just committed to USC a few months ago. But for the most part, it'll probably happen throughout the college basketball season. So it'll be interesting to see how these go and if the crystal ball changes at all with Cooper Flagg on the horizon. So jumping from another college basketball story to a different one, Dior Johnson no longer enrolled at University of Pittsburgh. Now, a lot of people, the casual college basketball fan, the casual all-around basketball fan probably doesn't know who Dior Johnson is, but this was pretty notable news in my opinion. Dior Johnson was a 4-star ESPN recruit for the high school class of 2022. He was the number 35 ranked player in the ESPN Top 100 for 2022. And his basketball career has been completely insane, just to put it lightly. He's been to a ridiculous amount of high schools and is yet to play a college basketball game and is now decommitted from 3 different schools. So we'll go over his timeline in a second. But Dior Johnson was originally committed to Syracuse, never even ended up staying committed until his senior year of high school. And his consistency has just been really bad. So his timeline goes, he was a freshman in high school in the 2017-18 season. He's from Saugerties, New York, and he began his high school basketball career in 17-18 when he played for Saugerties High School. He was an 8th grader who played for the high school team, so it tells you the kind of talent the kid had. And then the next season, the 18-19 season, he decided to go to IMG Academy. IMG Academy has put out a lot of NBA players in Florida. They're one of the better premier prep schools in the nation for getting guys ready for the NBA. He decided to go there for his freshman year of high school, did not play for IMG, so he decided to transfer back to Saugerties High School. And before, all in his freshman year, so this is still the 2018-19 season, so he started the year at IMG Academy, decided to transfer back to Saugerties, where he played a little bit, wasn't very comfortable back at Saugerties, so he decided to move out to Arizona, and he finished his freshman year in high school at Findlay Prep in Arizona. And then for his sophomore season in high school, the 1920 season, he started it at Hillcrest Prep. He had to leave Findlay Prep because they completely folded their athletic program. So it wasn't really his fault for leaving Findlay Prep. So he's decided to go to Hillcrest Prep, where he started his sophomore season, never ended up playing a basketball game there, transferred to Fairfax High School, which is in California, I believe, did not play a single game there, and then transferred to Mayfair High School, where he played his entire sophomore season of high school. And then going into his junior year, transferred yet again. He was transferred to Oak Hill Academy. Carmelo Anthony went there, another top-known prep school. Believe it's in the Maryland, Virginia area. Decided to start his junior year there. Didn't even play a game there. So he decided to transfer to Centennial Corona High School in California. He actually decided to play there. So he spent his entire junior season at Centennial Corona High School, and he won the California state title. First of all, I'm just going to pause it right there. Absolutely insane that a kid like this is traveling this much around the country just for high school, too. I mean, he's a New York kid. He went down to Florida, then he goes to Arizona, then he goes to California, then he goes back to Maryland. Like this, it's crazy. So he spent his entire basketball season, his entire junior basketball season in the 2021 season at Centennial Corona, won this California state title. Then he transferred again for his senior season. And he transferred back. He transferred to Prolific Prep, which is also in California, where he played a little bit of his senior season, and then he transferred yet again in the middle of his senior season to Southern Cal High School. And that's where he finished off his high school career. So he attended 7 different high schools. The only one that he ended up going to twice was Saugerties High School. But in the 5 years, if you want to count his 8th grade year, that he attended high school, he attended 7 different high schools. So Saugerties High School, IMG Academy, Hillcrest Prep, Fairfax, Mayfair, Oak Hill, Centennial Corona, Prolific Prep, and Southern Cal. It's actually 9, I should say. He attended 9 different high schools in his high school career. In the 5 years that he played high school basketball, he attended 9 different schools, and a good chunk of those schools he never even ended up playing a basketball game for. So kind of crazy. You don't know. Obviously, there had to have been some type of issue, some type of conduct issues or something that was, the reason why he kept transferring schools and couldn't stay at one school for a long period of time. But during his high school time, this is where the commitments kind of went crazy. So he made his first college commitment when he was a junior. In February of 2020, he committed to Syracuse. At that point, he was one of the top ranked ESPN recruits heading into the high school class of 2022. So in February of 2020, he committed to Syracuse, and by November, he decommitted to Syracuse. It was only a verbal commitment, not a written commitment. So now he's decommitted. And then June of 2021, when he was entering his senior year of high school, he committed to Oregon. And it wasn't just a verbal commitment, because he verbally committed in June, and then he signed to play for Oregon in November of 2021. And then by June of 2022, last summer, he decommitted to Oregon as he was about to enter Oregon. He was going to report to school in 2 months, but he decided to decommit. And then that same month, when he decommitted from Oregon, he decided to commit to Pittsburgh. He enrolled in Pittsburgh in September of 2022. This past year, the 22-23 season, was his freshman year. He enrolled in September. Things were looking all right for a week or two, and then he was arrested for domestic violence in that September and was subsequently suspended from the Pittsburgh basketball team in October. Went through a whole trial, all that kind of stuff. He pled guilty to the charges. I won't get into all the details of the charges, but it was a domestic violence dispute. And he returned to practice at Pittsburgh this past season in December, but he redshirted. That was part of his punishment. He was suspended from the school, and then they decided to let him practice, but he redshirted his freshman year. So he planned to be a redshirt freshman this upcoming season, the 23-24 season. And August 2023, this month exactly, as recent as a few weeks ago, he traveled to Spain to play in scrimmages with Pittsburgh, with the team. And he was planning on being an incoming freshman. And then just a few days ago, it was announced that he no longer attends University of Pittsburgh. So 9 different high schools, 3 different colleges, has yet to play a college basketball game, and he once again is a college free agent. And I have no idea what that's going to amount to. Obviously, domestic violence arrests mixed in with all that kind of stuff. The dude's got a lot of issues, but it would be very, very difficult to imagine that he gets another Power 6 opportunity. He got 3 of them. He got from Syracuse, Oregon, and Pittsburgh, and all because of his talent that they know that he has, the kind of potential that he has on the basketball floor, but he can't make it to the basketball floor. That's the problem. So he is now once again a free agent, and it's going to be interesting to see if he even signs with the school. I mean, the college basketball season, is just right around the corner. He'd have to commit to another school. It'll probably be a D1 school, but my guess is that if he wants any chance of being a college basketball player, let alone having any professional career in the future, he's probably going to have to settle for a low D1 or a high D2 school at this point. And he's going to have to kind of bear down and stay out of trouble, play in as many games as he can, and see if he can transfer after this season. But he's not going to get another top opportunity. I'd be very, very surprised if he did. So Dior Johnson, the long saga that is Dior Johnson, all of us big college basketball fans have known about him since probably 2018, 2019, when he was an underclassman in high school. And following his story has been absolutely crazy. So the craziness gets even crazier with Dior Johnson. But speaking of Power 6 schools, we'll jump into our next topic. So the remaining Pac-12 landing spots. Once again, the Pac-12 is beginning to fold. We've been covering this for the last few episodes. There's only 4 schools left after this season in the Pac-12. That's Oregon State, Washington State, California, and Stanford. I reported a couple weeks ago that the ACC had denied California and Stanford. Well, it looks like that there is a potential for a reconsiderment as it's still on the table that California and Stanford could possibly join the ACC. There's no word yet if the ACC is offering them a spot, but there's rumors going around that they could still possibly land that. Another possible opportunity for California and Stanford could be the Big 12. There's been rumors coming out the last few days that the Big 12 could be interested. They're already expanded to 16 schools to start next season, and they might be interested in not only Cal and Stanford, but also Oregon State and Washington State. So the Big 12 might end up putting the Pac-12 out of their misery and accepting the final 4 schools that are left in the Pac-12. And it would make it 20 schools in the Big 12 starting in the 23-24 season. Now, that was the rumor that came out a couple days ago. There was another rumor that came out from a different, somewhat independent sports company with decent credibility that said that the Big 12 has 0 interest in adding any of those 4 schools. So take it as you may. I mean, we heard a couple weeks ago that the ACC completely denied California and Stanford. Now we're hearing that ACC is still on the table for California and Stanford, but they're also considering the Big 12. So it doesn't surprise me that you're getting these conflicting reports. You'd never know for sure until one of these signings actually happens. But all we know is that for these 4 final schools that are in the Pac-12, they're going to be looking to leave the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is pretty much dead. Unless they can somehow convince those 4 schools to stay and they upgrade maybe some Mountain West schools into their conference and things like that. That's their only chance of sticking around, but I don't anticipate that happening. I think those 4 schools are going to be trying their hardest to join a different conference starting next season. They're going to jump at the first opportunity. If the ACC wants them, they might join the ACC. If the Big 12 does want them, they might join the Big 12. If a non-Power 6 school like the Mountain West or the American Conference or any of those very, very good conferences that are outside of the Power Six ends up making offers for them, then they might end up jumping on that too, just so they have a definite home starting next season. Because the the Pac-12 is completely falling under. So it'll be interesting. And I mean, these four schools, when we're talking about basketball and football, these are four schools that are not very competitive in either. So it makes sense that they're the last four left in the Pac-12. The powerhouses of UCLA and USC and stuff were some of the first to leave. And those are schools that put out contenders in both sports. Cal has put out some good football teams. They've put out a few decent basketball teams. Stanford, haven't seen really too many good basketball teams out of them. Oregon State, up and down. I mean, they had Gary Payton many years ago, but so they've had a few good years of basketball. Washington State's never really had a tremendous basketball program. They put out a few NBA players, Klay Thompson being possibly their most notable. But it makes things very interesting yet again, because not only can the Pac-12 completely fall under, but there's the great opportunity that the Big 12 could jump to 20 schools. And that would honestly be crazy to see a NCAA conference jumping to having 20 schools in them. I mean, there's been close to that, but they usually have two different divisions. I think that the Big 12, I mean, even with 16 schools, I think that there's a decent chance that the Big 12 makes two different divisions starting next year. And it's not all just like 16 teams duking it out in one division. That way you kind of give more opportunity to some of the different schools. And especially if they add, if they were to add California and Stanford too, you can make a West Coast conference and an East Coast conference. So you don't have to have the East Coast teams traveling out West to play against all of them like all the time. There's going to be some travel issues too. And especially if California and Stanford again decide to join the ACC, if the ACC lets them in, it's going to be crazy because it's the Atlantic Coast Conference. I mean, everybody in that conference is along the Atlantic coast, along the eastern part of the United States. And then you'll have California and Stanford, who are just completely on the opposite side. And when it comes to conference play time in January for college basketball, it's going to be interesting to see what the traveling schedules are going to look like for the ACC schools. Because, Cal and Stanford are going to have to travel a lot. They're going to have to play every other team that's in the ACC in their home arenas at some point. And it just makes it a lot more interesting. Exactly how they're going to go about it, and having as far of a West Coast team as possible, being, unless you're talking Alaska or Hawaii. But that's more news on the Pac-12 again. No definitive news. We're still waiting to see what these four schools do. We're still waiting to see if the ACC and the Big 12 are even interested in them, because we're getting conflicting reports from both of them. And it's definitely keeping things interesting, keeping things hot, while some of the less interesting stuff is going on throughout the basketball world. So jumping into some NBA stuff, James Harden and Damian Lillard. Last week we had no full episode, but we did a little special on James Harden. Some of the information that came out with him. Well, he just got fined for it. He obviously, if you've been following along, he publicly made it known that he doesn't want to play for the 76ers anymore. He's mad at Daryl Morey for not offering him a max contract, and he's gone about in a lot of different ways to say so. And the NBA fined him for being so public and demanding to not play for his own team. I mean, you can't do that. It's pretty obvious you can't do that. Damian Lillard has been somewhat doing the same thing. I mean, he has been doing the same thing, but he hasn't blatantly been doing it like James Harden. He didn't go out to a group of kids and say, I'm not playing for the Trailblazers ever again, like blatantly saying that. He's hinting that he's not going to play for the Trailblazers again, but he's doing things kind of within the rule book that is keeping him from getting fined. I think he's walking a very thin line, though. He's very close to getting fined, but the fining is not the story of either of these guys. I mean, the fines mean nothing to these guys. These guys have made over hundreds of millions of dollars in their NBA careers. So it really doesn't mean anything. It's more just interesting to see how the NBA condones this, because this is exactly Harden and Lillard. What they're doing is exactly what Adam Silver was trying to get rid of, with different CBAs and with some of the stricter rules that he's been making. He doesn't want as many super teams, and he doesn't want players to just casually be like, yeah, I've got a few years left on my contract, but I'm not playing for you. So you better trade me to this team, or you're going to have an unhappy player and things like that. Trying to avoid that, because that's, I mean, it's an epidemic in the NBA. There's no doubt about that. How I can't remember the last season that we had where there wasn't a trade request or something along those lines heading into training camp of the NBA season. There's almost always, like last year we had the Kevin Durant stuff. Didn't seem like Kevin Durant was going to ever suit up with the Nets again. And the Nets came out and said, we're not trading you. We're not trading you just yet. So it was either he sits out or he plays, and he decided to bite the bullet, suit up and play, and he ended up getting traded at the trade deadline. But he tried to end up making it work after demanding a trade last summer. And it's been happening year after year. And and I think the one thing is too, it's like why as many people aren't getting on Damian Lillard as they are with James Harden is that when it becomes like a consistent thing with certain players with every team that they are playing with, that's when it starts to get out of hand. And James Harden now in the past 4 seasons has demanded 3 trades. He, after the Houston Rockets let Chris Paul go, he demanded a trade out of the Rockets. He showed up fat to training camp because he didn't want to play. I mean, that's one of the most unprofessional things that you can possibly do. And everybody's joking around saying that he's going to do the same thing with the Sixers, which would be pretty funny if he ended up doing that. But he demanded his way out of the Rockets, got sent to Brooklyn, did not like the atmosphere in Brooklyn, Kyrie not getting the shot, all that kind of stuff. The whole Brooklyn thing kind of went up in smoke, demanded his way out of Brooklyn, got traded to the Sixers. Had a couple of flops in the playoffs now. He accepted a shorter-term deal heading into last season, and they had a golden chance. Well, let's face it, the Sixers had a golden chance to make it to the NBA Finals this year. They very well should have, instead of the Miami Heat. They had as good of a team as on paper, they had as good of a team as the Celtics and as the Miami Heat, but they choked in the playoffs again. James Harden choked when it came down to the stretch. Joel Embiid kept getting hurt, even though he ended up winning the MVP award. He couldn't stay on the court. When he did play, he was amazing, but the Sixers kind of flopped, and it's led James Harden to want out now again. And it's going to be interesting to see where he even ends up going. And it's going to be interesting for both of these guys to see where they end up going. I mean, I think the one thing that people get on Damian Lillard thing about is that he's demanding to be traded to one team, which is kind of like a crazy thing to do if you're like demanding a trade too, especially. It's like saying I'm only going to this team. It gives you no trade value, and Portland's not going to end up getting back as much as they think, because they're going to have a player that's barking in their ear, trade me to Miami or I don't play. So they know what they have to do. They have to trade him to Miami. I think though, with the Damian Lillard situation, I have a feeling, I don't think that he's going to stick in Portland that long, but he's going to start this season in Portland. Now I'm giving my cold predictions right now of what I think. It's almost September. It's going to be September in a few days. So end of August, this is my cold prediction. It might change in a couple of weeks, but I really think that they're both going to have to report to training camp, and Damian Lillard is going to start the season with Portland Trailblazers. He's going to play for the Portland Trailblazers, I think. He's going to start for them. He's going to suck it up and at least start the season with them. And I think they'll try to work on a trade package throughout the season. If he ends up getting off to a great start, he's healthy, all that kind of stuff, they might be able to get more for him from Miami or something, and they trade him during the season. James Harden, on the other hand, I don't think he gets traded before the season. I think he sits out because he's very, very serious about this. And he also is at the point, clearly, that everything has to be his way or he's not playing. And I think that especially it would also look bad on his part too, if after all the stuff that he said, all the stuff he pulled, hating Daryl Morey and all that kind of stuff, if he decided to suit up for the Sixers. I just don't see it happening. I don't think that he's going to report to training camp. I think he's going to get fined some money. I think that he's going to start this season. I don't think necessarily they're going to be able to trade him either. And I think he's going to start the season just refusing to play. And then they probably try to agree on a trade before the trade deadline for him. But those are two different situations. And I think there's too many stalls in the trade talks right now. And now that we're getting closer to training camp, teams are going to be less likely to make a big trade like this. Teams were a lot more likely to make this kind of trade in early July when free agency started. But teams are starting to put together the guys that most teams have an idea of the 20 to 21, 22 guys that they're going to invite to training camp, with 18 roster spots open, 15 on the actual roster, and then 3 two-way contracts because they're giving an extra two-way contract this season. So there's going to be 18 guys that make a team. And every team will have probably 22, 23, 24 guys in training camp. And most teams have an idea of who those guys are going to be. And I think that for most GMs, they're focused on that and not as focused on making like a big blockbuster trade right now. When the season starts and teams begin to struggle a little bit, and some players are playing tremendously, that's when I think trades are going to start heating up again. And then obviously the trade deadline, things will heat up a lot. Teams that think that they're very close, but they need that one guy might be willing to trade a little bit more, give that extra draft pick, give that extra young player or something for a guy that puts them over the top. You know, if Miami enters the season and Tyler Hero's playing well, but they're playing and they're just like, man, we're really like a Damian Lillard away of adding Damian Lillard to Butler and Adebayo to finally put us over the edge and win a championship. I mean, they've made it to 2 championships in the past 4 seasons and lost both. So if they come to that conclusion, maybe they throw Tyler Hero in the trade at the trade deadline, and Portland ends up getting possibly a franchise player in exchange for Damian Lillard. Those are the interesting things that I see about it. If anybody's going to get traded before the season starts, it'll be James Harden probably, because Daryl Morey might just want him out of here. Like, he may not even want to deal with him. He may not even want to give him the chance to not show up to training camp. He might try to, and he's also not asking for that much either. There's a lot of reports that came out that he's looking for a few first-round picks. That's it, which is crazy. For a guy of James Harden's caliber, for a GM to only be demanding like 2 or 3 first round picks. That's it. Not even a good player, not even a veteran. Maybe like a decent veteran that could help them win because they're still a pretty contending team if they trade him. But just a few first round picks, that's pretty uncharacteristic. I mean, you saw like Rudy Gobert get traded for 5 first round picks, and you see Portland. I mean, they're demanding a king's ransom for Damian Lillard right now. They're demanding a good young player that they can build around and like 4 first-round picks or something like that. So for Daryl Morey might end up pulling the trigger on 2 or 3 first-round picks, not even a player, maybe a veteran player to try to match the contracts a little bit that are, you know, that maybe is on like not a great contract, but still a pretty decent player, could come off their bench or something like that. I could see that happening. But if either of them is going to get traded before training camp, it's probably going to be James Harden, and it's more going to be a frustration thing of not even wanting him to be associated with the team anymore, not having that cloud over their head heading into the season, and kind of like getting a fresh start and being able to just focus on winning basketball. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting stuff to see how that goes down. And you know, those are my predictions early on. I don't think either of them get traded before the season starts. And I think that Damian Lillard will start the season with Portland. Those are the main things that I'm going to predict so far, but we'll see how it goes. And before we wrap things up on the show, another good signing that happened. PJ Washington agreed to an extension with the Charlotte Hornets, a 3-year extension. That's worth $48 million. He was a restricted free agent this offseason, kind of sat on the books for a bit. Nobody really offered him much because they knew that the Hornets would probably match whatever they offer. And this is a good get for Charlotte. PJ Washington has been one of their better young players over the past couple of years. They don't have that too many good big men. They kind of really needed him to kind of build a winner around. They want to get LaMelo Ball healthy. They're going to try to pick up where they left off a couple of years ago. They had a really bad year this year. They didn't have LaMelo for pretty much the entire season, but it's going to be Gordon Hayward's final year, and then they get that contract off the books, which is going to be huge for them. But the Hornets are definitely going to want to try to get a lot of their young star power to get back to normal. And they're also going to have Miles Bridges returning this year after not playing a single game last year, being a somewhat free agent. He never signed his qualifying offer, so he was associated with the Hornets, but he was going through a lot of legal issues and wasn't really focused on playing with all that kind of stuff going on. So for Charlotte, so they're going to get that back. And of course, I mean, they have the second overall pick that's coming in, Brandon Miller, who is going to slot into being one of their starting forwards, probably alongside Gordon Hayward. PJ Washington will probably start at the 5, and then we'll have LaMelo and Terry Rozier will probably be the backcourt to start for them. And then a few more younger guys coming off the bench. So it was a good signing. I thought it was very important for them to bring him back. And they got him on a pretty good deal. 3 years, $48 million. Not too bad. That's $16 million a year for a serviceable big man like PJ Washington, who's still young too. He's still only 23, I think. He's been in the league for a few years because he was one and done from Kentucky. But definitely a good get for the Charlotte Hornets. So that's going to wrap things up for tonight's episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Empty the Bench podcast network for another episode of the 3&D. Once again, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and follow the socials at the 3&D ETB and at ETB Network. We'll be putting out content all week. In case you missed excerpts of the episode, we'll be putting out the highlights of it. And once again, Monday night at 5 is the time to catch us on the Empty the Bench Network. Give us a like, give us a subscription. We're over 500. We're over 500 subscriptions now on YouTube. So keep it going, guys. We do this for you guys, and more basketball news will be coming. So everybody stay tuned, and hope you have a great week.